This video started in, oh, such an innocent way. Simply, all I wanted to do was play some old video games in the most authentic way. Oh hey, Black Mesa's on here. I've actually been playing that a lot recently. And actually a lot of games are on this list. Basically, I wanted to see if there is a use for Crossfire in 2025. Probably not, but I've always wanted to build out the absolute best system you could buy from 2014, as this was around the time I got into building computers. Problem is, old Intel Extreme Editions are still going for absolutely crazy money, and you can't really do anything with an original Titan. Honestly, this whole video style is overdone to a pretty extreme extent. So I thought, what if I made the system with 2 CPUs and 2 GPUs, and I water cool all of it, and I put an MATX case with a 1,000 watt power supply, and this is an abomination sold by Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. It is a dual X79 motherboard, and get this, MATX form factor. And it can support a whole 2 sticks of ECC DDR3 RAM. Also, the CPU sockets aren't facing the same way. It's kind of funny. This is honestly an impressive feat of engineering, I think. Or maybe it's just scary. All I know is it's been sitting on my wish list for probably a year now, just waiting for the right time to build into something beautiful. And beautiful it will become. Now, you're probably thinking, oh great, another budget YouTuber talking about how the Titan was the best graphics card ever, blah, 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 now it sucks. Nope, this is a card I think many people have forgotten over the years, actually. This card draws more power than an RTX 4090, had an MSRP of $1,500, and is just plain damn cool. This is a Radeon R9 295X2, a card that runs so hot it came from the factory with a hybrid style cooler. How cool is this thing? In terms of the slightly more boring things, this card came out in April 2014, just about 11 years ago. Oh my god, 11 years ago. I did not need a time crisis at midnight trying to write a script before bed. What have I done in the past 11 years besides play way too much Minecraft? Anyways, man, I need to go to bed. It came with 4 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory, a 28 nanometer chip, 6.2 million transistors, oh, and 2 R9 290Xs inside. Wait a minute. Do I have to explain what Crossfire is? I think, am I becoming old? More time crises is? Well, just to fill everybody in, back in ye olden days, AMD and Nvidia, or if you really want to be pedantic, 30FX, then Nvidia, wanted to pump more power out of our graphics cards. So they started to just let you throw multiple cards into a system. AMD Crossfire specifically came out in 2005 and would let you use 2 to 4 GPUs in a system to increase your performance. The idea was basically you could buy one card now at the top of your budget, like this R9 280 I bought back in 2014. Then once your budget allowed, buy a GTX 980 Ti because most of the games I played couldn't use Crossfire at that point. Either way, in my opinion, Crossfire was pretty cool, but did have a lot of drawbacks. One big one being having 2 cards in a system is going to take up a ton of space in your case, and it's going to use up 2 PCIe 16X slots. Plus, combining 2 mid-range GPUs generally didn't make much sense unless most of the games you played really took advantage of Crossfire. It would honestly make more sense to just sell your budget card and upgrade to one higher-end card rather than buying a second budget card. The only time I really saw Crossfire making sense was high-end GPUs, and I guess AMD felt the same. That's why they crammed 2 of their highest end GPUs into this thing to get ultimate performance. Because when you already have the world's fastest GPU, or at least AMD's fastest GPU, and want more performance, then just throw another one in there. And now you have 2. And double the performance, maybe, hopefully, somewhat. Oh, and for anyone else who's too young to know, these were AMD's top tier cards from the time. They used to run hot as hell, and the blower style ones were insanely loud. But they were good deals, I think. Honestly, I don't remember that much. I do remember the 780 Ti kind of kicking its ass a little bit. But either way, the R9 295X2. This also required not only an insanely beefy power supply, but one that could push 28 amps through each 8-pin connector, since this only has two power connectors. AMD built a card that quite literally just ignored how much power is supposed to go through PCIe connectors. They just said, screw it. If you want performance, I will give you performance. I guess at some point I should get to the rest of the system. 2 10-core Intel Xeon 2690 V2s, 2 32GB DDR3 DIMMs. Interesting tidbit, both sticks of RAM work with either 1 or 2 CPUs installed. I truly have no clue how this works. Honestly, I am just confused and shocked. Like, just in general, at this entire thing. And you know what else I'm shocked by? this video sponsor, Ugreen. The Ugreen NAS Sync DXP 4800 Plus, the most beginner-friendly NAS. The DXP 4800 Plus has a 5-core Intel Pentium Gold processor and 8 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM that's upgradable to 64 gigabyte, and it has a 10 gigabit port. I have mine set up with 4 14 terabyte Toshiba Enterprise hard drives, which leaves me more than enough storage for all of my footage. If I really wanted to though, I could max this thing out with up to 112 terabytes of storage, which is pretty insane, and download files to it at 1250 megabytes per second. I can also access these files from almost any device, so if I wanted to export a file and see how it looks on multiple devices, I can pull it up on my phone, laptop, or desktop. I also take a lot of photos, and a really neat feature of the DXP 4800 Plus is they have local AI built into the NAS software, so you can search your photos simply by inputting keywords or descriptions. This is all local, so the photos don't need to be uploaded to internet for Big Brother to look at, so you're not going to give up privacy for convenience. Also, World Backup Day is coming soon, so to keep your data safe, click the link below to get a limited 20% off. That is insane. 20%. Now the fun part. Putting this thing together. I got a Lian Li A3 MATX, which in theory should support a full ATX power supply, along with the radiator for my GPU, and perhaps very stupidly, actually, as we found out later, incredibly stupidly, very beyond stupidly, my 2 AIOs for each CPU. Did I mention the power supply was 1000 watts? Now it's time for assembly. Putting in the motherboard was simple enough. Then the GPU, CPUs went in their sockets, all simple. Then I had to hook up all the power ahead of time due to some size issues. Let's not talk about that. And then I discovered the AIO blocks the CPU rad from fitting in the case, causing a pretty major issue with everything fitting. So I did what I do best. I jammed everything in there and made it fit. Should I put some regular CPU coolers on here? Probably. Should I have tried to find another smaller power supply so I'm not hammering my wires at an angle? For sure. Is this going to be closely monitored and only used for an hour or two at the absolute max? You know it. After hooking up all of the fan splitters, there's so many. I truly wanted to vomit. Please, trust me. I'm going to make a nice, clean, and small PC next. I promise. Alrighty. Okay. Now we're in. It's working. It powered on. It boots. I installed Windows, got into Windows, and the PC was just randomly crashing. Like constantly. I just solved this though by updating Windows and getting all of the optional updates. Once all the optional updates were done, I decided to install the AMD drivers, and Crossfire was already enabled by default. Now I can just find games that support 2 CPUs, which doesn't exist, but there's actually a decent amount of games that support dual GPUs. Sweet. That was until the second CPU decided to leave the chat. This build is now pointless. What I decided to do though is instead of take apart this monstrosity for troubleshooting, I went ahead and just ran all the game testing with one CPU, since basically no games take advantage of 2 NUMA nodes. Unfortunate, but this thing is a ticking time bomb in my eyes, and I want to test it and be done with it. What won't be a ticking time bomb though is my new NAS I'm building with 4 1.6 terabyte NVMe SSDs. Subscribe for that. So let's get into the gaming. BioShock Infinite, 1080p max settings, because it actually can support 2 GPUs. We're actually going to use one at first as a comparison, just as it stands with 1 GPU enabled. It's very jittery, minimal CPU usage, but pretty good FPS actually. The whole system is very unresponsive though, even with Alt F4. I have to Control-Alt-Delete to close the game, and a lot of programs honestly. But on the bright side, I bet the GPU runs physics better than a brand new 5090. Maybe. I don't know how physics. I really don't know how physics works. Actually, I just tick it on, and I don't. It's an NVIDIA thing, isn't it? That was a really bad joke. Either way, we ended up with an average of 165 FPS with a 1% low of 94. Maximum was also 216. With the second GPU enabled, I ended up with an average of, you're not going to believe this, 174 FPS. Truly groundbreaking. The 1% lows, though, were 62, and the maximum was 362. So essentially, the average was slightly higher, the 1% lows were lower, and the maximum was slightly higher. Honestly, I didn't even feel that much of a difference in the gameplay itself. Maybe bumping up to 4K would have been better, but the CPU was hardly being used, so I don't know. I saw that Black Mesa also supposedly supported dual GPUs, so I had to try it at 1080p max settings, and surprisingly, it worked like normal. Way more normally than it worked not that long ago, last time I tested it. The coil whine is also atrocious on this thing. God. Anyways, the reason it was working was AMD just randomly disabled Crossfire on me. So now I can launch it again, and dear Lord. Yep. Crossfire is working. It's really bad. I don't think it's even using the second GPU, honestly, but it sure is a disaster on the pause screen. Other than that, the game does seem to run fine. Task Manager seems to think it was using both GPUs though, so I guess it maybe hopefully was. Average FPS was 195, 1% low of 44. Could be worse. The system, man, this system is so unusable though, man. it's so bad. Anyways, I need to go to bed. Good night. I decided to try Metro 2020 at max settings 1080p, and actually it was great. Granted, this game is so old it doesn't really matter what uses the GPU, but I don't know, use was found at least, and it didn't seem to be hindered by the GPU, at least in the starting areas. Average of 132 FPS, 1% low of 67. GTA 5 just didn't work at all. Sag. Big black screen. One last thing though I did want to see was how hot this would get with the cooling setup, so I went ahead and opened Bioshock Infinite again, left it running, and just want to see what happened. After about an hour, the CPU was about 52-ish degrees Celsius, GPU was around 65 C. Very impressive. Granted, they weren't working their hardest during this, so I ran FurMark and CPU burner. This caused things to heat up a little bit, and honestly worried me a little, but it is cooler than I thought it would be. It did heat up the room quite a bit though, and I was way too scared to leave this running for very long due to the system's instability and also the just horrible cabling situation. So yeah, there's that. This is the part where I'd normally do some testing of less gamery things, but due to the second CPU leaving the chat, it's kind of pointless for a lot of them. Yeah. So any CPU testing would be pretty much pointless, and since the GPU is so old, Blender doesn't want to use it. I know any sort of video editing is going to be pretty much pointless with the lack of VRAM. Yeah, I got nothing. This is a total waste of time and money. And I know any sort of video editing is going to be pretty pointless with the lack of VRAM. Yeah, I got nothing. This thing's a total waste. If you want to see another total waste from AMD, check out my AMD FX video.